My wife chose to be her rich boss's surrogate after I warned her it would end our marriage. She said, "My body, my choice." Now she and her family are begging me to take her back, but I'm done. Not my baby, not my problem. The first time my wife told me she intended to carry her wealthy boss's baby, I thought I had misunderstood her. I warned her that making a decision that enormous without considering our marriage would destroy everything we had built. She looked me straight in the eye and said, "It's my body, Ethan. My choice." Months later, after the pregnancy became real and the people praising her selfless gift stopped showing up when she needed actual help, she and her entire family expected me to rescue her. My answer never changed. Not my baby, not my responsibility. My name is Ethan Parker, and until that Tuesday night in October, I believed my life was ordinary in the most predictable way possible. My wife Rachel and I had been married for 8 years. We had 3 children, a mortgage that seemed to grow heavier every month, and a house filled with mismatched furniture, unfinished chores, and the normal chaos of raising a family on a middle-class income. Our oldest son, Caleb, was old enough to believe every school project was a national emergency. Lily, our middle child, had strong opinions about everything from clothes to breakfast. Nora, the youngest, still climbed into our bed during thunderstorms. My accounting job paid the bills, but it was not the kind of work that made me wake up inspired. Most days I was grateful simply to get through the commute, dinner, homework, and bedtime without someone crying. That evening, the kids had finally gone to sleep after a long debate about why ice cream could not count as dinner. I was stretched out on our old leather couch, scrolling through streaming options without committing to anything. Rachel entered the living room wearing a strange smile, the kind she usually wore when she had made a purchase she hoped I would not question. Instead of sitting on the opposite end of the couch and looking at her phone, she lowered herself beside me. "So," she began. Nothing good in a marriage ever seems to begin with that particular word. So usually means the car needs repairs, a relative is coming to stay, or someone has spent money that was supposed to cover the electric bill. I muted the television and turned toward her. "What happened?" She took a breath, but she did not look nervous enough for someone about to change the course of our lives. "I'm going to be a surrogate for my boss, Victor Langford." For several seconds, I genuinely believed she was joking. The statement was so far outside anything we had ever discussed that my mind rejected it. I laughed and reached for the remote. "That's funny. What do you actually want to tell me?" Rachel did not laugh. She sat perfectly still, watching me with the same serious expression she used during parent-teacher conferences or conversations about our credit card balance. "I'm serious." The room suddenly felt too quiet. "You're telling me you plan to become pregnant for your boss?" "Victor and Celeste have been trying to have a child for years," she explained. "Celeste has had several miscarriages, and her doctors told her another pregnancy could be dangerous. Victor asked whether I would consider helping them." The way she called him Victor bothered me almost as much as the request itself. At work, he had always been Mr. Langford. Somewhere along the way, my wife had become close enough to her boss to discuss his marriage, his wife's medical history, and his plans to have a child. I had not known any of those conversations were happening. "When did he ask you?" "Last week." "And you've been thinking about it for a week without saying anything to me?" I wanted to understand how I felt first. I stared at her, waiting for some indication that she recognized how serious this was. "Rachel, no." Her expression changed immediately. "You don't get to decide for me. This is not the same as taking a different job or changing your hair. You're talking about becoming pregnant and carrying another family's child for 9 months. That affects your health, our children, our finances, our daily life, and our marriage. It's a medical arrangement, Ethan. It isn't an affair." "I didn't say it was an affair. I said it would affect all of us." She folded her arms. "I would be helping 2 people who desperately want a family. What about the family you already have?" Rachel looked around the living room as though our house, our children, and our 8-year marriage had nothing to do with the conversation. "This doesn't take anything away from you." "How can you possibly promise that?" She sighed with visible impatience. "Because I'm still going to be your wife and their mother. I'm carrying a baby, not leaving the country." I tried to slow the conversation down. I asked about the medical risks, the legal arrangements, the recovery time, and how she expected to explain the pregnancy to the children. She had an answer for every question, but none of those answers involved anything we had decided together. Victor would cover medical expenses. The children would be told that she was helping another family. She would continue working as long as possible. His company would accommodate appointments. She spoke as if the plan were already settled and I was merely being informed. Then she said the sentence that changed the conversation from a disagreement into something much worse. "It's my body, Ethan. My choice. I don't need your permission." I understood what she meant. I was not claiming ownership over her body, and I never believed marriage gave me that right. But marriage was supposed to mean that decisions capable of reshaping both partners' lives were discussed honestly and made with some respect for the person who would live with the consequences. Rachel was treating my concern as an attempt to control her because that was easier than acknowledging that she had already chosen what she wanted. "I'm not asking you to surrender control of your body," I said. "I'm telling you that I have control over whether I remain in this marriage. If you go through with this after I have told you what it will do to us, our marriage will not survive." For a moment, she said nothing. I hoped the seriousness in my voice had reached her. I hoped she would look beyond Victor and Celeste's gratitude and consider what pregnancy had been like for her before. She had suffered severe nausea with Lily. Her back pain during Nora's pregnancy had been so intense that I handled most of the evening routine for months. We had 3 children who still depended on both of us every day. This was not an abstract act of generosity. It was an enormous physical and emotional commitment. Instead, Rachel stood and smoothed her shirt. Her face had become cold and controlled. "Then maybe you should rethink what being a husband means." She left the room before I could answer. I remained on the couch, staring at the muted television and realizing that the marriage I believed I had might already have ended. Neither of us had moved out. No papers had been filed. The children were asleep upstairs, and the dishes from dinner were still in the sink. From the outside, nothing had changed. Inside that room, however, Rachel had made it clear that my place in her decision mattered less than her determination to please her boss. Over the next several days, I tried repeatedly to reopen the conversation. Each morning, I woke with the faint hope that she had reconsidered overnight. Instead, she moved through the kitchen humming, making coffee and packing lunches as if she had not dropped a bomb into the center of our family. "We need to talk about the surrogacy," I would say. "I've made up my mind," she would answer. Sometimes she added that Victor and Celeste were good people. Other times she told me I was being insecure or dramatic. Every version of the conversation ended in the same place. She believed helping them was noble, and she considered my objection a personal failure rather than a legitimate response from her husband. I tried approaching the issue from every practical angle. I reminded her how difficult her previous pregnancies had been. She said every pregnancy was different. I asked who would manage the children if she became sick or was ordered to rest. She said we would work it out. I asked what would happen if she developed complications. She told me Victor would pay for whatever care she needed. I asked how the children would feel watching their mother prepare for a baby who would not become their sibling. She accused me of making the situation confusing before we had even explained it to them. Then I learned that Victor had offered her $25,000. Rachel initially insisted the money was not why she had agreed. She said it was compensation for the inconvenience and physical demands, not payment for the baby. Even so, the amount was significant to us. We were behind on several household repairs, carrying credit card debt, and constantly calculating which expenses could wait. I could understand why $25,000 appealed to her. What I could not accept was that she had allowed the money and her boss's approval to outweigh the stability of our family. The situation became worse when Rachel began recruiting support from her relatives. Her older sister Natalie called me one evening while I was helping Caleb with homework. She used the overly gentle voice people adopt when they intend to criticize you, while pretending to be compassionate. "I wanted to tell you how proud I am of Rachel," she said. "For what?" "For agreeing to be Victor and Celeste's surrogate. It is an incredibly generous thing to do." I glanced at Caleb, who was chewing on the end of his pencil and pretending not to listen. "That decision is between Rachel and me. She's my sister. I'm allowed to support her. Supporting her does not require calling me to explain why my concerns are wrong." Natalie ignored that. "She's giving people the chance to become parents. You should be standing beside her instead of making her feel guilty." "I'm not making her feel guilty. I'm asking her to recognize that she already has a family whose lives will be affected." "You're being selfish, Ethan." That word followed me throughout the entire ordeal. Anyone who praised Rachel was compassionate. Anyone who questioned the arrangement was selfish. Apparently, there was no room for the idea that a person could respect Rachel's bodily autonomy while also deciding that the consequences were incompatible with remaining married to her. I ended the call before Caleb heard more than he already had. Natalie was only the beginning. That Sunday, Rachel's mother, Margaret, cornered me in the church parking lot while Rachel was collecting the children from Sunday school. Margaret linked her arm through mine and smiled as if we were about to discuss a casserole recipe. "I hear you're having trouble accepting Rachel's decision. I don't think this is the right time or place. There is never a wrong time to discuss supporting your wife." I tried to remove my arm without creating a scene. "Rachel is making a decision that will affect our entire household. I believe she should have discussed it with me before committing to anything. Marriage is about supporting each other's dreams. Carrying her boss's baby was never one of her dreams until he asked." Margaret's smile tightened. "What she is doing is a sacrifice. She is helping a couple who cannot have a child. You should be proud. What about the sacrifice she is demanding from our children? What about the strain on our marriage? You are making this about yourself." "No. I'm trying to keep someone from pretending it affects only Rachel." Margaret patted my arm. "A good husband stands beside his wife." I had no productive answer to that. In her mind, being a good husband meant unconditional cooperation, even when my wife openly dismissed the marriage. Any boundary I set could be reframed as cruelty. Any objection could be labeled insecurity. I walked away before the conversation became louder. That night, after the children were asleep, I asked Rachel to sit with me at the kitchen table. It was the same table where we had planned vacations, paid bills, celebrated birthdays, and helped the children finish school projects. I wanted her to understand that I was not bluffing. I need you to listen without interrupting, I said. You have the legal and personal right to make decisions about your body. I also have the right to decide what I can remain married through. If you proceed with this surrogacy, I will file for divorce. Her expression flickered. For a second, I saw uncertainty, and I believed she might finally grasp the consequence. Then she crossed her arms and hardened her voice. Then maybe you should rethink what being a husband means. It was the same response she had given before. There was no confusion and no misunderstanding. I had stated my boundary clearly, and she had rejected it clearly. From that moment forward, the question was no longer whether she understood. The question was whether she believed I would follow through. For the next 3 months, we lived in a strained imitation of normal life, while Rachel attended consultations and completed the clinic's process. We slept in the same bed, but rarely spoke beyond practical matters involving the children. She shared details with Victor, Celeste, Natalie, and Margaret while treating me like an obstacle who would eventually surrender. I did not interfere with her appointments or try to prevent her from leaving the house. I continued working, caring for the children, and repeating the same position whenever she attempted to present the procedure as inevitable. Part of me kept hoping the arrangement would fall through. Maybe the clinic would reject her. Maybe Victor and Celeste would choose another surrogate. Maybe Rachel would remember how physically difficult pregnancy had been and decide that $25,000 and her boss's gratitude were not worth losing her marriage. That hope was not rational, but it allowed me to postpone facing the finality of what was happening. The morning the pregnancy became real, I was downstairs making coffee before work. Rachel came into the kitchen wearing an old pink bathrobe and holding a pregnancy test. Her steps were slow, and her face carried the mixture of excitement and fear I remembered from the mornings she told me she was pregnant with Caleb and Lily. This time, the sight filled me with dread instead of joy. It worked, she said. I'm pregnant. She held up the test with a triumphant smile, as if she expected the reality of the pregnancy to transform my opinion. I looked at her for several seconds. Every argument had already been made. Every warning had already been given. There was nothing left to debate. Okay, I said. Her smile faded. Okay, that's what I said. That's all you have to say? You made your decision 3 months ago. Now I'm making mine. I went upstairs, dressed for work, and said goodbye to the children. Caleb was eating cereal while trying to play a game on his tablet. Lily was upset because the shirt she wanted was still in the laundry. Nora had covered most of her face with yogurt. The ordinary chaos of that morning made the situation feel even more painful. These were the people Rachel claimed her decision would not affect. She followed me to the front door. Ethan, we need to talk. No, we don't. I already told you what would happen. You can't seriously end our marriage over this. I'm not ending it because of one conversation. I'm responding to months of being told that my place in this family does not matter. I picked up my keys and left. During lunch, I called Daniel Mercer, a family law attorney I had known since high school. Daniel and I had played baseball together. He had been a reliable shortstop, an awful math student, and one of the few people from those years I still trusted. When he answered, I told him I needed advice about a divorce. What happened? He asked. My wife is pregnant through a surrogacy arrangement with her boss. I opposed it from the beginning, told her it would end our marriage, and she proceeded anyway. Daniel was silent for a moment. You need to come into my office. Bring any written messages or documents that show what was discussed. We need to separate the emotional facts from the legal ones. That response helped ground me. Daniel did not promise that a judge would share my moral view. He did not claim the surrogacy itself would automatically determine custody or property. He explained that the court would focus on the children's stability, our finances, our living arrangements, and each parent's ability to cooperate. My warnings to Rachel mattered because they documented the breakdown of the marriage, but they were not a magical legal weapon. Over the next 2 days, I gathered what I had. I saved messages in which Rachel acknowledged that I opposed the arrangement. I wrote down a timeline of our conversations while the details were still clear. Daniel prepared the petition and advised me not to retaliate, interfere with her medical care, or create scenes at her workplace. I asked for primary custody because I believed the children needed stability, an equitable share of the house, and a clear declaration that I held no parental responsibility for the baby she was carrying. Rachel was served at work. She called me that afternoon, crying so hard that I struggled to understand her. You can't be serious, she kept saying. I told you exactly what I would do. I thought you were angry. I thought you would calm down. I repeated it for 3 months. So you're punishing me? No. I am refusing to pretend that our marriage is intact after you made it clear my role in it was optional. She begged me to withdraw the filing until after the birth. She said the stress could hurt the pregnancy. I told her all further legal communication needed to go through our attorneys. I did not want a private argument later presented as harassment or emotional abuse, and Daniel had warned me to keep conversations focused on the children and household logistics. Victor called me that evening. His voice was polished and calm, the tone of a man accustomed to resolving conflict by speaking slowly and expecting others to comply. Ethan, I think there has been a misunderstanding. There hasn't. What Rachel is doing for Celeste and me is extraordinary. It is a gift. I would hate to see her marriage suffer because of an arrangement meant to create a family. You asked a married employee to carry your baby. She agreed after I told her it would end our marriage. The consequences are not a misunderstanding. I never intended to interfere between the two of you. Intent does not change the effect. Rachel needs support through the pregnancy. Then you and Celeste need to arrange it. This is your child and your agreement. His tone sharpened slightly. She is still your wife. She is also your surrogate. You cannot insist the arrangement is solely between you when decisions are being made. Then call me her husband when the difficult parts begin. Victor tried to return to the language of generosity, family, and sacrifice. I ended the call. Whatever influence he had at Rachel's workplace did not extend into my marriage. Filing for divorce did not make Rachel disappear. She remained in the house because neither of us could immediately afford a second residence, and because Daniel told me not to leave without a temporary parenting agreement unless the environment became unsafe. Moving out voluntarily could complicate custody and access to the children. We therefore entered a tense domestic arrangement, in which Rachel moved into the guest room, and we communicated mostly about school, meals, bills, and schedules. The guest room gradually filled with prenatal vitamins, medical paperwork, boxes of baby supplies, and an unassembled crib. Victor and Celeste purchased most of it, but their involvement was selective. They attended major appointments, asked questions during ultrasounds, and discussed nursery plans. They were less available for the daily realities of pregnancy. Rachel continued acting as though I remained responsible for her personal care. She texted requests for specific groceries, asked me to drive her to appointments when Victor and Celeste were traveling, and expected me to assemble furniture for the baby. Each request reinforced the contradiction at the center of her position. When she wanted to make the decision, it was her body and none of my business. When she wanted assistance, I was suddenly her husband and obligated to help. My response became simple. Please contact Victor and Celeste. This is part of their arrangement. When she pushed harder, I said what eventually became the defining sentence of that period. Not my baby, not my responsibility. The first time I said it, Rachel looked stunned. She accused me of being cruel. I reminded her that I had not created the arrangement, approved it, or agreed to provide support for it. I continued paying my share of household expenses and caring for our 3 children. I did not deny her access to food, shelter, or emergency assistance, but I refused to become the unpaid partner responsible for making Victor and Celeste's surrogacy convenient. Pregnancy was hard on Rachel. The nausea extended far beyond the morning. She developed intense cravings, struggled with exhaustion, and sometimes fell asleep sitting upright on the couch. As her pregnancy progressed, moving around became increasingly difficult. The people who had praised her decision were far less useful when encouragement needed to become labor. Natalie was enthusiastic by phone but often unavailable in person. Margaret offered advice and moral support while avoiding the late-night calls and practical tasks. Victor and Celeste attended the appointments that allowed them to see the baby, but their work, travel, and social obligations repeatedly took priority when Rachel needed ordinary help. More than once, she knocked on my bedroom door in the middle of the night. "Ethan, are you awake?" I usually was. The tension in the house had destroyed my sleep. "The baby is kicking, and I'm worried," she whispered one night. "Can you sit with me? Call the medical number the clinic gave you. I don't need a nurse. I need someone here. Call Victor." He isn't answering. That does not make this my responsibility. Sometimes I heard her crying after I refused. The sound hurt because I had loved her for 8 years, supported her through illnesses, and sat beside her during every fear involving our children. Emotional detachment did not happen the moment I filed for divorce. Part of me still wanted to open the door. But every time that impulse rose, I remembered the months she had spent dismissing my concerns and telling me I did not get a vote. She had not wanted a partner in the decision. She wanted a caretaker for the consequences. Even our neighbor, Mr. Bennett, noticed the strain. One Saturday morning, he stopped me while I was taking out the trash. Through the kitchen window, Rachel was struggling to reach a cabinet. "Everything all right over there?" he asked. "Rachel looks exhausted." "She is. Aren't you going to help her? She has people responsible for supporting the pregnancy." He looked confused. The neighborhood knew she was pregnant, but very few understood the full arrangement. "She's still your wife. We're in the middle of a divorce. The baby belongs to her boss and his wife." Mr. Bennett frowned. "Whatever happened between you two, she may need help. Then the intended parents need to provide it." He shook his head. I could see that he considered my position harsh. From outside the marriage, the situation looked simple. A pregnant woman needed assistance, and her husband was refusing. What he did not see were the months of warnings, the unilateral decision, and the expectation that I should absorb every consequence after being told my consent and feelings were irrelevant. By the 3rd trimester, our house had become an exhausting performance of shared space without shared purpose. Rachel moved slowly, complained about swollen ankles and constant pressure on her bladder, and became increasingly angry that I would not resume the husband role she had rejected whenever it suited her. I focused on work and the children. Caleb needed help with school. Lily had questions she did not know how to ask. Nora understood only that Mommy was having a baby who would not live with us. We explained the surrogacy in simple terms. Rachel told them she was carrying a baby for Victor and Celeste because Celeste could not safely carry one herself. Caleb wanted to know why she had agreed. Lily asked whether the baby was their brother. Nora asked whether Mommy would still love them after the new baby arrived. That question devastated me because it showed that, despite Rachel's insistence, the arrangement had already affected them. Rachel assured Nora that nothing would change. I watched our daughter nod without looking convinced. The birth began on a Tuesday in March while I was at work reviewing quarterly tax filings. My phone buzzed repeatedly. I allowed the first several calls from Rachel to go to voicemail, assuming she wanted another favor. When the calls continued, I answered in case one of our children was involved. "It's time," she said breathlessly. "The baby is coming." For a fraction of a second, instinct took over. I remembered rushing her to the hospital during her previous labors, checking the bag, calling family, and trying to remain calm while driving. Then I remembered that this was not our child and that the people who had created the arrangement were supposed to manage the delivery. "Call Victor." I did. "He's in a meeting and his assistant is trying to reach him." "Call Celeste. She's at a spa retreat." "Ethan, please, I need you." "Call the clinic and the hospital. They have your medical plan." She began crying. "I don't want to do this alone." I ended the call after confirming that she had contacted emergency medical services. I did not leave work. That choice was the hardest boundary I had enforced, and even now I know many people would judge me for it. But I could not stand beside her in a delivery room, hold her hand, and play the role of supportive husband while she gave birth under an arrangement she had chosen over our marriage. The hospital called later that afternoon. A staff member told me Rachel had delivered a healthy baby boy and was asking for me. "I am not the child's father or intended parent," I explained. "Please contact Victor Langford. He and his wife are parties to the surrogacy arrangement." The staff member hesitated. "Mrs. Parker is distressed and asked for you specifically." "I understand, but we are separated and in active divorce proceedings. Victor Langford is the person responsible for the baby." I provided the contact information I had and ended the call. For the rest of the day, I struggled to focus. I was not celebrating her pain. I felt relieved that the delivery was over and that both Rachel and the baby were physically safe. I also felt the grief of understanding that one of the most intimate experiences in our marriage had been repeated for another family while our own relationship collapsed. That evening, I picked up Caleb, Lily, and Nora from after-school care. Caleb was excited about receiving a high grade on his volcano project. Lily was upset because another student had taken her favorite eraser. Nora wanted pancakes for dinner. Their ordinary problems steadied me. "Where's Mommy?" Nora asked while I fastened her car seat. "She's at the hospital." "Is she sick?" Lily asked. "No. The baby was born, and the doctors are making sure everyone is healthy." "Is the baby going home with the other family now?" Caleb asked. "That is the plan." We went home, ordered pizza, and spent the evening together. Without the constant tension surrounding the pregnancy, the house felt peaceful for the first time in months. I hated that Rachel was alone, but I also recognized that Victor and Celeste's absence proved what I had feared. They had been present for the meaningful photographs and medical milestones. When Rachel needed someone during the frightening, painful reality of labor, neither of them had made her the priority. Around 8 that night, Rachel called from the hospital. "Please come," she whispered. "I'm scared." My chest tightened. I remembered the woman I had married, the mother of my children, and the person I once expected to grow old beside. Love did not disappear just because trust had been destroyed. "Where are Victor and Celeste?" "They came for a while. They're handling paperwork." "Ethan, I need someone who cares about me." That sentence revealed the tragedy more clearly than anything else she had said. She had spent months believing that becoming indispensable to Victor would earn lasting loyalty. Now, after carrying his child, she was discovering that his concern had limits. "I did care about you," I said quietly. "I warned you because I cared about you and our family. I made a mistake. The baby was born only a few hours ago. You're exhausted and emotional. This is not the moment to rewrite everything. Please, you made your choice, Rachel. Victor and Celeste need to support you now." I ended the call and turned off my phone for the night. I was no longer willing to serve as the emergency backup whenever the people she had prioritized failed her. Victor and Celeste eventually arrived with flowers, gifts, and the public excitement expected of new parents. However, the legal and practical transfer did not happen as smoothly as Rachel had imagined. The baby remained with her during the initial recovery period while medical and administrative arrangements were completed. She came home 3 days later carrying him. Watching her enter the house with that baby was surreal. She looked pale, exhausted, and emotionally hollow. Boxes of supplies were waiting in the guest room, and the unassembled crib had finally been put together with help arranged through Victor. Rachel moved as though she expected me to step forward automatically, take the carrier, and resume the role of husband. I did not. The baby cried frequently. Bottles appeared in the sink, formula containers covered the counter, and dirty diapers filled the trash. The washing machine ran constantly. Our children moved carefully around the house. unsure whether they were allowed to touch the baby or ask when he would leave. "Why is he still here?" Nora asked one morning. "I thought he was going to live with the other people." Rachel looked overwhelmed. "Sometimes a baby stays with the woman who carried him for a little while before going home. So you're like when we took care of Grandma's cat?" Lily asked. Rachel winced, but the comparison was not entirely wrong. The baby belonged with another family, yet everyone expected our household to absorb the temporary care. The difference was that a newborn required constant attention, and Rachel was recovering physically while managing intense emotions she had not anticipated. She began looking at me with a mixture of pleading and anger. She could not understand why I did not volunteer to hold the baby, wash bottles, or take a nighttime feeding. From her perspective, my refusal was proof of cruelty. From mine, helping would have drawn me into the very arrangement I had rejected from the beginning. The confrontation finally came about 2 weeks after she returned from the hospital. I was helping Caleb with math in the living room when the baby began screaming upstairs. Rachel appeared at the top of the stairs, holding him against her chest. Her hair was unwashed, her hands were shaking, and exhaustion had hollowed out her face. "Can you please hold him for 10 minutes? She called. "I need to take a shower." I kept my eyes on Caleb's worksheet. "Call Victor or Celeste. They aren't here. That doesn't make him my responsibility. Ethan, please." "Not my baby, not my responsibility." The sentence landed differently with the child physically in the house. Rachel came down the stairs slowly, her face tightening with rage. "I am sick of your attitude," she said. "You owe me this much." I looked at Caleb. His eyes were wide, and he had stopped pretending to work. "Go upstairs for a while," I told him. "I'll help you finish later." He left quickly. Once he was gone, I stood. "What exactly do I owe you?" "Support. I'm your wife. This is your house, and you can't act like I don't exist. You stopped treating me like your husband the moment you decided the marriage had no place in your decision. You told me I did not get a voice. You told me to rethink what being a husband meant. Now that the consequences are exhausting, you want the benefits of having a husband again. It wasn't supposed to happen like this. I told you it would affect all of us. I was trying to help people. You chose Victor and Celeste's wishes over the stability of our family. I am not going to become a substitute father because the intended parents cannot be bothered to handle the difficult parts. You're abandoning me." "No, I'm refusing to clean up a situation I warned you not to create." The baby continued crying. Rachel's voice rose with his. She called me cold, vindictive, and selfish. I picked up my keys before the argument became worse. "Call Victor, call Celeste, call Natalie or your mother, but stop demanding that I solve this." I drove for 2 hours listening to the radio without absorbing a word. When I returned, Rachel's car was gone. So were the baby and most of the supplies from the guest room. She had taken him to Natalie's apartment. For the first time in nearly a year, the house was quiet. Caleb, Lily, and Nora were upstairs, shaken by the argument, but safe. I made boxed macaroni and cheese, and we ate it in front of the television. No one asked where Rachel had gone. The children seemed relieved that the crying had stopped. After putting them to bed, I sat alone in the kitchen. I did not feel victorious. I felt exhausted and deeply sad. Refusing to enable someone's choices can be necessary without feeling good. Rachel had made her decision, but our children had paid part of the price for it. The quiet lasted 2 days. Then the calls began. Natalie left the first angry voicemail. "I cannot believe you forced Rachel out of her own home with a newborn. She is sitting in my apartment crying. And you are acting like none of this is your responsibility. How can you be so heartless?" A woman named Erica Lawson, one of Rachel's college friends, whom I had met only twice, left another message. "What you're doing is disgusting. Rachel gave a couple the greatest gift anyone could give, and instead of supporting her, you are punishing her." Margaret's voicemail lasted several minutes. She said she had believed Rachel married a man who would stand beside her for better or worse. She accused me of abandoning a vulnerable woman, failing as a father, and setting a terrible example for the children. Not once did she acknowledge that Rachel had been warned, or that Victor and Celeste bore any responsibility for the situation. The calls all followed the same script. Rachel was selfless. I was cruel. Her decision existed in isolation, while my response was treated as the only cause of the family's collapse. Victor called during dinner the following evening. I answered and placed the phone on speaker while cutting Nora's chicken into smaller pieces. "I wanted to discuss the situation with Rachel and the baby," he said. "I believe there has been a misunderstanding." "There is no misunderstanding. What Rachel did for Celeste and me was extraordinary. She gave us the opportunity to become parents. She deserves support during the transition, then provide it. We are providing financial support. She needs practical help. The baby is in Natalie's apartment because you and Celeste did not have arrangements ready. There were complications with the timing. Those complications are yours to solve." Victor paused. "Rachel is still part of your family. You cannot call her part of my family only when you need me to perform labor for your arrangement. We are all connected through this child now." "No, we are not. The child is yours. I never agreed to become part of your family, and I never agreed to help raise him. There is an innocent baby involved. Your baby. Your responsibility. His calm tone finally broke. You're being unreasonable. You wanted the joy of parenthood. The exhaustion, diapers, feeding schedules, and responsibility are part of parenthood too. You do not get to outsource those parts to the marriage your arrangement helped destroy. Victor started to say Rachel needed me. I interrupted. She needed to consider her husband and children before she agreed. I told her the consequence. She proceeded. You were aware I opposed it, and you proceeded too. Stop calling me. I ended the conversation. The audacity of everyone involved was astonishing. Rachel's relatives, friends, and employer had encouraged her while the decision felt symbolic and noble. Once the situation became physically and emotionally difficult, they expected me to absorb the burden. None of them called to ask how Caleb, Lily, or Nora were coping. None asked how I was managing the household while working full-time and preparing for divorce. Their compassion extended only in the direction that required the least self-examination. The divorce process continued for 6 months. The legal system moved slowly because there were financial disclosures, temporary parenting arrangements, evaluations of the children's needs, and negotiations over the house. Rachel remained with Natalie for much of that time. The baby's placement with Victor and Celeste was eventually formalized, but Rachel continued to struggle emotionally and financially after the birth. Her relationship with Victor changed once she was no longer carrying his child. The attention, gratitude, and promises of ongoing support became less frequent. Rachel's attorney, Martin Cole, built her case around the image of a compassionate woman abandoned during pregnancy. He argued that I had acted vindictively because I disagreed with a decision involving her body. Daniel prepared a different argument. He did not claim that I had the authority to forbid the surrogacy. He focused on the documented breakdown of trust, Rachel's dismissal of our marriage, the instability imposed on the household, and the practical question of which parent had consistently maintained the children's routine. When the case reached a hearing, Rachel arrived in a simple black dress, with Natalie and Margaret sitting behind her. Victor and Celeste appeared as well. Their presence seemed intended to confirm the nobility of Rachel's decision, though it also reminded everyone that the people who benefited most from the arrangement had watched another family disintegrate around it. Martin spoke first. He described Rachel as a woman who made a profound sacrifice for a couple struggling with infertility. He emphasized the physical demands of pregnancy and the fact that I filed for divorce after the procedure succeeded. He referred to my refusal to attend the birth and portrayed it as evidence of emotional cruelty. His presentation was effective because it contained facts. I had filed while she was pregnant. I had refused to attend the delivery. I had declined to provide care related to the baby. Without context, those choices sounded heartless. Daniel then introduced the context. He presented messages between Rachel and Natalie in which Rachel acknowledged that I opposed the arrangement from the beginning. In one, she wrote, "Ethan is being a baby about this. It's my body, my choice. He doesn't get a vote." The message did not prove she needed my permission. It proved she understood the depth of my objection and chose to dismiss it rather than work through it. Daniel also submitted email exchanges between Rachel and Victor. The messages showed that they had discussed compensation, appointments, and logistics, while barely addressing how the arrangement would affect Rachel's household. In several exchanges, Rachel assured Victor that I would come around despite knowing I had stated the opposite. Finally, Daniel used a recording of one of our kitchen conversations. I had made the recording after several discussions left me concerned that Rachel would later claim I never warned her. The recording captured me saying calmly that proceeding with the surrogacy would end our marriage. It also captured her response. "Then maybe you should rethink what being a husband means." Judge Harris asked whether Rachel disputed the authenticity of the messages or recording. Her attorney did not. Martin argued that a husband's threat of divorce should not restrict a wife's medical choices. Daniel agreed with the first part and clarified the distinction. "Mr. Parker did not seek an order preventing the procedure," he said. He acknowledged that Mrs. Parker could make the decision. He also communicated that he could not remain in the marriage if she made it. This case is not about ownership of her body. It is about whether the resulting breakdown and instability support the parenting arrangement she now requests. That was the first time anyone in authority expressed the issue accurately. Rachel had the right to proceed. I had the right to leave. Rights did not eliminate consequences. The court did not decide custody based solely on the surrogacy. Records showed that I had maintained the children's school attendance, medical appointments, meals, and home routine during the separation. Rachel's living situation remained unstable, and her contact with the children had become inconsistent while she recovered and managed the aftermath of the arrangement. The evaluator's focus was not on punishing her for carrying a baby. It was on what arrangement provided the most stability at that time. 2 weeks after the hearing, we returned for the ruling. Judge Harris stated that the marriage had broken down following a major unilateral decision made with full knowledge of the other spouse's stated boundary. He noted that the court was not deciding whether surrogacy was morally right or wrong. Its responsibility was to divide the marital estate and protect the best interests of Caleb, Lily, and Nora. He awarded me primary physical custody. Rachel received scheduled supervised visitation on a temporary basis, with the possibility of expanded time after demonstrating consistency, stable housing, and an ability to focus on the children without involving them in the conflict. The supervision was not presented as permanent punishment. It was a protective step during a period when the children had already experienced too much instability. When the judge finished, Rachel began sobbing. Natalie moved toward her, while Margaret stared at me as though I had personally written the ruling. "I don't want to lose them," Rachel said. For a moment, I saw the woman I had once loved, rather than the person I had spent the past year fighting. I kept my voice controlled. "You have not lost them, but you have to show up for them. They need a mother who makes them a priority. You took them from me." "No, the court looked at what has been happening. You can rebuild your relationship with them, but you have to do the work." Her face tightened. "You wanted this. I wanted stability. I wanted you to think about the children before everything collapsed. I asked you repeatedly." I picked up my briefcase and walked toward the door. Before leaving, I turned back. "I will not use the children to punish you, but I will not let them become emotional support for the consequences of your decisions. Be consistent. Follow the plan. Prove to them that they matter." Outside the courthouse, the air felt clean and cool. Daniel walked beside me. "The ruling gives the children stability," he said. "That was the goal." I nodded. I did not feel like a winner. 8 years of marriage, months of pregnancy, and half a year of legal conflict had ended in a courtroom. There was no victory in that. There was only a chance to build something healthier from what remained. Caleb, Lily, and Nora were waiting at home with a sitter. They wanted to know whether the court was finally finished and whether they would have to move. I told them they were staying in the house with me and would continue seeing their mother according to the new schedule. "Is Mommy in trouble?" Lily asked. "No," I said. "The adults are working out how to make things safe and predictable." "Does she still love us?" Nora asked. "Yes. Adults can love people and still make choices that hurt them. Your mother needs time to show you she can be dependable." That explanation was not perfect, but it was more honest than telling them nothing had happened. 6 months later, our house had settled into a new rhythm. Saturday mornings were loud and disorganized. Caleb tried to make pancakes and regularly forgot a step. Lily corrected him with the confidence of a professional chef, despite never following a recipe herself. Nora believed chocolate chips could improve every meal. One morning, I sat at the kitchen table while Caleb cracked eggs into a bowl. "Did you put the shells in there?" Lily asked. "That's texture," he said. "That's disgusting," Nora replied. I laughed for the first time that morning. The kitchen smelled like coffee and slightly burned batter. Sunlight came through the windows, and no one was walking on eggshells around an argument that could begin at any moment. This was not the polished version of family life people posted online. It was loud, imperfect, tiring, and real. The children still struggled sometimes. Lily once asked whether Rachel had stopped loving us. Caleb acted out at school during the first months after the divorce. Nora occasionally waited near the window before scheduled visits because she was afraid her mother would not arrive. We talked to their school counselors and followed the recommendations given to us. Recovery was not one dramatic moment. It was homework, routines, repeated reassurance, and showing up on ordinary days. Rachel's visits remained supervised at first. Sometimes she arrived prepared and focused entirely on the children. Other times she canceled because of work, money problems, or conflicts with Natalie. Each missed visit disappointed them, but over time they learned that her inconsistency was not their fault. She called me occasionally about matters unrelated to the children. "Could you help me with my electric bill this month?" "No." "Can I stay at the house for a few days?" "Natalie and I are fighting." "No. I know I made mistakes. Can we talk about trying again?" "No." I did not refuse because I enjoyed watching her struggle. I refused because every rescue would have drawn me back into the same pattern. Rachel had spent years believing that other people would absorb the consequences of her choices. The healthiest thing I could do for myself and our children was maintain clear boundaries. Victor and Celeste gradually reduced contact with her after the surrogacy was complete. They had the child they wanted and a life built around their own priorities. Whatever promises Rachel believed their gratitude implied did not become the permanent bond she had expected. She eventually understood that being invaluable during a pregnancy did not make her part of their family. That realization was painful, but it belonged to her. I could not repair it without sacrificing the stability I had fought to create. "Dad, can we get a dog?" Nora asked as Caleb attempted to rescue the pancake batter. "Ask me again when everyone remembers to put their clothes in the hamper." "So never?" Lily said. "Probably when you're 30. Caleb held up the mixing bowl. A piece of eggshell floated on the surface. "Should I start over?" "Yes," I said. "And this time, leave the shells out." "Can we add chocolate chips?" Nora asked. "Absolutely." Outside, rain began tapping against the windows. Inside, our kitchen was warm, noisy, and safe. This was not the future I imagined when I married Rachel, but it was a life built on honesty instead of denial. The baby had never been mine, and the arrangement had never been my responsibility. Caleb, Lily, and Nora were different. They were my children, and protecting the peaceful life we had rebuilt together was a responsibility I would never walk away from.